welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, I just thought I'd pop up and show you. We've had a bit of snow, as you can see. We've had about, oh no, probably about 6 inches of snow over the past 24 hours. And this is what the allotment looks like in the snow. I don't think anybody's been up this morning. There's no footprints anyway, that's for sure. But I was going to dig some parsnips up today, but I don't think that's going to happen. But as you can see, the cages are a little bit weighed down with snow. This is the only reason I've come up, really, just to quickly knock them off. You can see there's been plenty of little birds knocking about, but this one here, look, you can see what the weight of the snow does. So all I'm going to do is just get in the cages like this, and then just push the snow off like that. It's easy with a broom actually, when I haven't got the camera, but the weight, this is the only thing you need to worry about with tunnels, is when you get you get quite a lot of weight in there, and tonight it's more likely than not to freeze, and that'll all freeze there. If it was thawing, it'd just turn into water obviously and come through, but you can see how much it stretches the material. So what I'm going to do is get a broom and just quickly push it all off, and likewise with the other one. Now this one's really strong, as you know. The poles will take, most certainly take the weight, but there's a reasonable amount of weight. You don't realise how much weight there is in snow. But this one at the bottom is a much lighter frame, as you can see. And if I leave that, you can see the bars in the middle have bent. If I leave that for too long, that's just going to completely collapse. So I'm just going to get the broom, knock that out, and then that should be okay. So obviously put the camera down to do that. And the other thing is, obviously, is with the greenhouses, you will find actually that the snow will typically run off a greenhouse. So as it's snowing, it'll kind of, just sort of slide off the roof. But what you do need to do is, if it is sort of mounted up on the roof like this, and like it is here, just kind of push it all off like that down the side, and then that will stop the weight on the glass, because you can potentially have the roof collapse. So I'm just going to get the broom, brush that off. I just thought I'd let you see what the allotment looks like in the snow. Okay, so these are the Yacon plants. We've got the 3 here, and obviously you saw me cut these down the other day. Now the Yacon plant, you need to dig to get the root out, which is obviously the bit that you eat. You need to come back about a foot or so from the plant, so about here. And I suggest you do it with a spade, because you're going to create the least amount of damage to the plant by doing that. And you need a reasonably strong spade, because obviously these roots can go down quite deep. And just go around the plant as best you can, loosen it up like that. And what you might find is it might not come out in one go. Right, so I should be able to leave that out. Now what you can do is obviously dig over the ground later, but I'm just going to pull that out so you can see what it looks like. So that's what the underneath, oh, sorry Dorothy, that's what the plant looks like underneath. Now we've got 2 different sort of structures underneath. You can see this one here. Now that's a crown, because it's got these pointed bits on here, and that's the bit that you save to grow for next year. Okay, so that's the bit that you save for next year. And then at the bottom, what you should have are more rounded more rounded pieces. I'm just going to break this up so you can actually see what we've got. See, these all look like crowns to me. Yeah, they look all like crowns to me. Okay, let's keep digging. Let's see what we've got underneath. Again, that looks like another crown. Okay, so that's those are crowns, I think. These are the bits you eat. So there's no pointed bits on there. So I'm pretty sure that's the bit you eat. So you eat that bit. The bit that looks like it's got pointed bits on, like that. Obviously that's the bit that's going to grow next year. So what I'll do is I'll clean these up, so it's easy to see what's what, and then I'll show you what they look like in the next clip. Okay, so you can see the amount of crowns and tubers that I've got off them now. I've got to admit, it's really difficult. This is the first time I've grown Yacon, and to be honest with you, everything looks like a crown to me. So if you look at this one here, you can see these sort of spiky bits here. Now they obviously look like ginger. Now these bits here, these are the growing tips, so that's obviously a crown, that part there. And I believe that these bits here are the tubers. Having said that, these also have sort of spiky bits on, so they could also be crowns. So I've got to be honest with you, I've gone through this and there's nothing that's obviously a tuber. They all look like crowns to me. Now this bit here, you'd say that's a tuber, but again you've got kind of pointy bits on there that could potentially grow into another plant. So obviously tubers are sort of just stores of starch basically. So those are not sort of going to grow again. That's effectively like food for the plant. And then any crown is effectively what the plant grows from again. So all of these bits, it does look very much like ginger, but all of these bits here, so this pointy bit here, that pointy bit there, this bit here and there, that's all going to grow. So all of those will sort of grow into a plant next year. So I've got to be honest with you, all of this looks like crowns to me. There's nothing that looks, too much. I mean, that looks like a massive crown. None of them look like tubers. Even these bits here look like crowns. So anyway, that's what I got off the Yacon. Now, with Yacon, it's not advised that you wash them, because if you wash them, you can damage the skin, and then they're quite prone to getting fungus on them and stuff like that, and them rotting. So I'm going to use these in the near future. So basically I've just washed these to show you, so you can see what they look like. The rest of them I'm just going to leave with the dirt on there. I'm going to spread them out in the other greenhouse, let them dry out, and then hopefully the dirt will sort of come off. You need to keep them in a reasonably frost-free environment over the winter. Keep them dry and frost-free, and then plant them out again obviously in the spring. But these ones here, I'm going to try and eat them in the next few days. So I just sort of washed them to show you now. I'm assuming that you can eat the crown and the tuber alike, so I'm going to, everything that's in that bucket pretty much I'm going to try and make a cake or something out of. But the rest of it, all of this here, there's some quite large lumps here, as you can see. I'll be keeping them to either eat later or to grow on for next year. Okay, so I want to go through a few more comments with you that were put over. Now, these were put on the channel September and October of this year. Again, I do apologise for not getting back to you before now, but with all the everything that's been going on. I just haven't got around to doing it. So I'll go through them now. One thing I will say, if you didn't catch the last episode, is any comment that's put on the channel, I will always read it, and I'm always very grateful to get feedback from any of you. So please sort of bear with me at times. Like, you know, sometimes I'm just too busy to do the comment sections or respond on the internet, but I will in some way eventually respond to you, so I do apologise for that. First comment comes from Eyes Garrett, and she was asking what variety climbing beans have I got. Now these are the seeds here that I've been drying for the past few months, and the seeds are kind of white. Just open this one up so you can see. I don't know if you can see that, but they're the white seeds inside the pod there. Now, I bought these seeds probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. The seeds that I bought were from Frenchy, which is the seed company. I've no longer got the packet. I've thrown the packet away. But on the packet, all it said was climbing beans. That's all it said. There was no variety name on there. So if you go to Frenchy seeds and then look for the climbing beans, that's the variety that I grow. But I've been really pleased with it. Again, with any beans or anything like that, the runner beans came from my great grandmother, and I've been basically growing the same beans from them all my life. My father grew them before me, etc. So they've been kind of passed down through the family, and they're always really good croppers. And the climbing beans, as I say, they came from Frenchy, and I don't keep buying the seeds. All I do is I just save the ones that have run to seed. So I'll save the pods like that at the end of the year, dry them out like this as, and then obviously you've got sort of, I don't know, 8, 9 seeds in each of the pods, which will take you through to next year. So you know, I only ever buy bean seeds once. Likewise with the you know, you can do exactly the same thing with broad beans as well, and also with sunflowers. I never buy sunflower seeds. Some plants you always do have to buy the seeds. Things like pumpkins and courgettes and stuff like that, I always buy the seeds for them, because you never know what you're going to get. In the past I have saved the seed, and you grow them and you spend all year growing the plant, and then you end up with some weird gourd that you don't know what it is. It isn't a pumpkin or a courgette or anything like that. Because the varieties are so closely together, and if you've got plants, they don't have to be that close together. If they're within a few metres of each other, they will cross-pollinate. If an insect goes from one to the other, they will cross-pollinate, and then you'll get a version. For example, if you've got butternut squash, pumpkins and courgettes, which is what I grow together, if you save the seed from any one of those, whether it be the seed from a butternut squash or a pumpkin or a courgette, the plant that you get will be some kind of hybrid between those three. You know, you might get a pumpkin crossed with a butternut squash, or a butternut squash crossed with a courgette. Obviously they're still edible, but you know, they're not a courgette, they're not a pumpkin, they're not a butternut squash, so they're a bit weird. You can do it, but I always buy the seed, because then I know they are genuinely either pumpkins or butternut squashes or courgettes. So that's one type of plant. The gourds, you really do need to buy the seeds. But things like beans, as long as you keep the beans apart, I don't know if you've noticed, but the broad beans I always grow down the bottom end of the allotment, and the climbing beans I always grow at the top. Try to grow them as far apart as you possibly can if you've got more than one variety. Then they won't get cross-pollinated, and then you'll get some kind of hybrid between the two. But yeah, those are the beans. So they're basically called climbing beans from Frenchy beans. The next comment comes from John King, and he was talking about this comes from a comment I made back in September with my chilies, because I grow, this year I grew cayenne pepper chilies, and also the jalapeno chilies. And what I do is I let them grow, and you can pick them either when they're green or when they're red. As you know, as I said, if you pick them earlier, it encourages the plant to grow more sort of peppers. But all I do to save them is slice them up, as I explained, length, sort of cross. You know, so if that's the chili, you cut it that way if you like, and then basically I just put that into a plastic bag or a plastic box or something like that. Put that in the freezer, freeze it, and then I can just take out a bit at a time when I'm cooking chili or whatever. What John King has suggested to do is he puts it in a liquidizer with a little bit of olive oil to get it moving, and then he whizzes them up in the liquidizer, and then puts that into ice cube trays, and then freezes that, and then when he's cooking something, he just takes out an ice cube worth or wherever, and put that into his cooking, and sort of do it that way. So that was a good suggestion. I have actually noticed that a lot of Indian food shops, you can get ginger and chilli and also garlic ice cubes that to put in your cooking. So I think it's becoming more and more common to do that. Next comment comes from Richard from Cornwall, and he said that he's managed to get hold of a greenhouse. He's inherited a greenhouse which is 12 by 8, which is just a little bit bigger than this one I'm sat in now. And he was saying that he wants to put some beds in like I've got here. And he was saying, do I put 2 foot wide beds in, or do I put 3 foot wide beds in, sort of lengthways? I would recommend. I've had greenhouses in the past. I've had 6 foot wide greenhouses, and I've also had 8 foot wide greenhouses. Before I had this one in a different place, I had a 6 by 12 greenhouse, and I had 2 foot wide borders down each side and all round the back, and they were brick built. I built them in brick, and basically the top part was wood. The bit where the glass was, it was brick up to about 2.5 foot, and then the rest of it was wooden. I basically built it myself, and I had beds in there which were 2 foot wide, and I must admit the beds did used to dry out. There's an ideal width, and I think 3 foot is a good width for a bed. The reason being is it's not too big that you can't reach over and get at the plants at the back. I think if it was 4 foot, you'd struggle to get to the back of the border, to water and to weed and pick the fruit or wherever. 2 foot, I think, is a bit too narrow, and what you tend to get is, or what you can get, is the bed dries out. If you've got a 3 foot wide bed, that tends to be like a good volume to keep the moisture, and also you can get to the back and reach. Now, an 8 foot wide greenhouse, which is what this is, lends itself to having 2 3 foot wide beds in one either side, leaving you obviously with a 2 foot wide walkway in the middle. So that's what I would suggest you do. Another comment that Richard asked was about the plastic. The whole reason for the plastic is to stop the wood from rotting. Obviously, when you've got tomatoes in here, you're watering the ground that's in here, and obviously that's wet all the time. Because I've got timber to make the boxes, and these are made out of pretty much scaffolding planks, so they're kind of inch and a half wide planks, and it's kind of 18 inches or so high, and I always leave a gap at the bottom just to let any excess moisture out. Now this greenhouse is on slabs. There's no bare ground in here at all, so this is completely slabbed underneath here. But obviously there's the gaps between the slabs to let the water sort of drain out. Now the plastic basically covers the wood and then goes in slightly. It's only about 6 or 9 inches or so. And the whole reason for that is to keep the wood dry. Obviously, if the wood was wet, it would eventually rot, and if it rotted, obviously, I've got glass going all the way down to the floor, and my concern when I put the plastic in was if the wood rotted, potentially it would start to push the glass and would break the glass. So basically, I've made a wooden square, if you like, out of the planks, and what I've done is I've put that in the greenhouse, and then I've covered that with plastic, basically to prevent the wood being wet and stop it from rotting. So at the bottom of the earth is just slabs, and then obviously when I'm watering, if I overwater for any reason, the water will just go straight through onto the slab at the bottom, and then it'll seep through the slab obviously into the ground. So that's basically how I constructed it. So in summary, I would recommend you have 3 foot wide borders, because that I've found that's about right. Obviously if it's too big, you can't reach the back. If it's too narrow, if it's 2 foot or so, it doesn't give you that sort of volume to keep it moist. So it can have a tendency of sort of drying out. As I say, the actual earth is about 14-15 inches or sort of 40 centimetres deep. And obviously in there, obviously with anything with gardening, it's all about the preparation. Your borders in your greenhouse, put as much organic material in there. You want it to hold the moisture, as much organic and sort of fertile material as you possibly can do. So any compost, grass, cuttings, chicken manure, any manure you can get your hands on, dig all that into the ground. The more goodness you get into the ground, the better your plants are going to be, the healthier plants you're going to be, and the least likely they're going to be to catch any kind of disease or any problem. So my recommendation would be, make your borders 3 foot wide, up to 2 foot deep. Line the wood with plastic to stop the wood from rotting, and then you know, fill your boxes with as fertile ground as you possibly can do. And then when you put your tomatoes in there, obviously they'll be away. And that for me is I've found over the years that's the best scenario for growing tomatoes and other crops, and that's in the greenhouse. Right. Next comment comes from Brian from Allotment Life, and he was saying about the sunflowers. Now he had his sunflowers out, and something completely stripped the seed off his flowers. And also Nigel from Muddy Boots has also put a few comments on about he couldn't believe that the seeds haven't been stripped by something already. Obviously this is one of the sunflowers that was left on here, and obviously a mouse has not got to it quite yet. But you know, the comment that I put was, if a mouse came in the greenhouse and had some of these, I wouldn't really bother too much. You know, I mean, the mouse is entitled to them as much as I am, really. But as long as I've got some seed for next year, I'm all right. But we don't tend to get too much mouse damage here. There are mice about. I mean, there's loads of mice about. But as you know, I've got a cat which tends to keep the numbers down a little bit, and actually she's just sat out here now. And so I don't sort of struggle with sort of mice too much, but as long as I've got enough seed to grow some flowers next year, I'm not really too bothered. Obviously I'll give the rest of the chickens and stuff. But if you've had the seed stripped off your flowers, it could either be a bird or it could be a mouse or something. Obviously mice will go up. Mice can get pretty much anywhere, to be honest with you. And there's a comment about leaving it on this shelf because a mouse will crawl up there, and I completely admit, yes, they will sort of crawl up and get that. But I can't really help you, I'm afraid. But the only thing I can suggest is picking the heads as early as you possibly can do before they get nobbled by something, and then take them in the house. I would suggest you leave some in the ground because, you know, it's also in your allotment or garden, because it is nice to give back a bit to wildlife as well, and the birds. But what's had your seeds? It could be a bird or a mouse, I really don't know. Next one comes from Mags 8, and she was talking about her grandson growing potatoes and that, and he's had a few problems with blight and that. Now the most blight resistant potato, to my knowledge, is Hungarian Sarpo, which is a quite a nice variety of potato. I don't actually grow it, but that's renowned for being blight resistant. No potato is blight resistant at all. You know, every potato variety, every tomato variety, and obviously any eggplant, aubergine can get blight as well. So, you know, nothing's absolutely fireproof when it comes to blight. However, some varieties are less susceptible, is probably the best way to put it, to blight than others. And basically the Hungarian Sarpo is the variety to go for. But the recommendations that I would make with blight always comes about when you've got a humid environment. Obviously it's a fungus, so it's a humid environment where the spores are able to multiply and then attack the plant. The three things I would advise is keep the plants as healthy as you possibly can do. In other words, you know, they've got all the nutrients they want. A healthy plant is much less susceptible to blight, irrespective of the variety. The next thing I would say is don't overcrowd your plants. Now, this isn't only how close to put them together, but also keeping them weeded. If you've got your plants far enough apart, you will have spaces in between, and the air can get in there, and you won't get moisture being held around the plant, so the humidity will be low. So what I suggest is, don't plant the potatoes too close together, because if they're crowded, that's where the moisture is going to hold, and when it rains, the moisture will stay in there, and that's when you're going to get the environment for blight to flourish, if you like. So make sure that they're sort of well vented, and sort of far enough apart, and also make sure you keep them weeded. A lot of weed that you get, things like, well, any weeds really, but things like chickweed is one, where that will most certainly hold moisture in, and that'll basically create this overcrowding in your potato patch, and that will hold the moisture in, which will enable the blight to flourish. So always keep your potatoes well fertilised and healthy. Second thing is, don't plant your plants too close together, and thirdly, make sure that they're weeded. And basically those last two, what you're trying to do is keep the ventilation going. Obviously, a lot of people can't help the amount of ventilation they've got in their potatoes, but keeping them far enough apart and keeping them weeded so you've got spaces between the plants will most certainly help that. Obviously, in a field like this where you've got multiple allotment plots, if one person gets blight, it's likely to go straight across the field and everybody will get it. There's not a lot you can do with that. If you've got a sheltered area in the bottom of the garden where you haven't got other people growing potatoes nearby, you're less likely to get blight. So that's obviously a fourth thing you could do, but obviously if you're limited to where you can grow them, obviously there's not much you can do about that. But what I suggest is keep the plants as dry, the top part of the plant as dry as you possibly can do. If you do water the potatoes, water the ground, don't water the plant. What you don't want to do is get the leaves wet. Obviously if it rains, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you're watering with a hose pipe, what I suggest you do, if it's a particularly dry period, go up the row with a hose pipe, but water the ground, not the plant itself. So you want to get the ground wet, but not the plant. Keep the plant dry as dry as you possibly can do. Keep them well weeded, keep them as far apart as you can, and keep the plant healthy and happy, then you're considerably less likely to get blight. But as I say, if it's in the environment anyway, you're fighting losing battle, I'm afraid. Those are all the sort of the tips to help you. Obviously, you can spray the plant with sprays to stop blight from getting on the plant, but if you go to that kind of bother, I mean, there's a gentleman across here. He grows a lot of potatoes, and last year he was spraying his potato plants 3 times a week with like Bordeaux mixture or other sort of fungicides to to stop the blight. He's still got it. He's still got blight all over his potatoes. So to be honest with you, even spraying them, I mean, the farmers spray 2 or 3 times a year. 2 or 3 times a week during the year where they got the potatoes growing, and even they get blight on their potatoes as well. So spraying it isn't really a a solid way of preventing getting blight. You still can get it, and you need to spray them sort of 3 times a week. And do you really want to grow vegetables that you're spraying with fungicides 3 times a week? I try to stay away from chemicals and that, so I would recommend you do them 3 things. So I hope this episode was of some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you've got below, and I'll always get back to you. And I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Home Garden.